I want to thank very warmly Professor Pelagidis for a vivid discussion that involved by the numbers, analysis, and insights. I want to move straight on with our next speaker, who comes from Lithuania. He's the president of the Lithuanian Free Market Institute and the former Minister of Justice and Mayor of Vilnius. His name is Remigijus Simasius. Mr. Simasius, the floor is yours.
Dear Christian, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's of course a privilege for me to be here. What's the level of your energy right now? Thanks God you have some water and candies on the table, so this might help, and I'll try to do my best in my 13 minutes. I was a politician for 17 years, and the thing I learned, somewhere quite successful politician, in the middle of my career, that before people listen to what you say, they try to understand why you are telling this and why we have to listen to you at all. And I think this is a quite natural question, should be for you as well here, because there's some guy you never probably heard about before from the north, from a country which is like 4 times smaller than Greece. Why? What he is able to talk to you, especially when Greece has so many things to tell to others right now, how to overcome disastrous crisis, how to fix macroeconomics, how to boost capital markets. I mean, this is the most inspiring story, how to get from frontier market to emerging market. And I think this is the story I'm trying to sell to Lithuania all the time, pointing to Greece and look, learn from them. But yes, of course, learning from each other is very important. I have also something to tell to you. When I was a Minister of Justice, I was conducting a radical reform on how we perform business regulations in order to reduce the burden of business regulations. Because I think, Christian is right when he was saying that macroeconomics is essential. Without it, you can do nothing. But even if you fix macro, but you have a disastrous microeconomic system, it's still a disaster. So business regulation is a kind of thing which affects everyone. So we did a reform. The result of this reform, 2/3 of business leaders surveyed, they said, in 2 years, now it's way better, which is an amazingly good result. My benchmark was 1/3, so we reached 2/3. We also, when serving as a mayor of Vilnius, I was able to achieve the result that Vilnius was selected as the most business-friendly city in Europe, according to FDI index, and for having best investment strategy. And of course, Lithuania is doing very well both at the moment and the course of 30 years. The fastest growing economy of all European economies, and in a very good shape. And I mean, it's an amazingly strong story for us. And I will not talk so much about taxes. It was covered more or less, but just a small moment about taxes. Lithuania is selected as like top 5 country in tax competitiveness according to Heritage Index. Okay, that's nice. I think it's too generous. But still, I do understand why it is done so. But I think we have a very tiny, important thing why our disastrous tax system looks better. Because we have quite better tax implementation than average. The mission statement of our tax inspection is, our mission is to help taxpayers to pay taxes in as smooth manner as possible. Okay, who can argue with this? I mean, this is amazingly good, and it leads to practical things, automatization and so on. Even the tax system is very complicated, you don't feel it because everything is pre-filled for you. And if you call tax inspector, they advise you how to pay less taxes if you're a small business, for example. I mean, this is amazingly good, and they also follow their advice. I mean, if they advise you have to do this or that if you don't know how to pay taxes, and then another tax inspector comes and says, no, that one was wrong, and now you have to pay some fine and taxes, you are protected. You're protected because even if you had a call advice, it's recorded and you bring it to administrative call and it's done, and basically you are safe because if you follow the advice, I mean, it's done. And actually, I'm proud because I was a Minister of Justice back then when we were doing this reform. Lithuania is the only country in OECD so far which has a general rule that if any business supervisory agency advises you on something, they are bound by this advice. They have to follow this advice. No other country has this general rule, which means that it's complete lack of integrity in major inspections and supervisory agencies. I mean, this is common sense, actually, to have this. And I didn't know, actually, that nobody else had this when I was introducing this. So that's what made me easier to implement this. So we have some good things, but again, just looking to European picture, the problem is clear. European Union was exporting regulations for so long, and this was a good thing because it helped our competitiveness because everyone else was trying to follow our rules. It's not a game anymore because more and more we see that when European economy share in the world economy is shrinking, I mean, more and more services are bypassing European Union. I mean, we are not as interested as before. So we are not exporting even regulations anymore. When we look to Draghi report, which is a kind of sacred report defining what problems do we have, I'm quite skeptical about this. I mean, I don't know how many people have actually read this report, like several hundred pages. I read most of it, and I'm quite surprised that actually two things, basically two things he offers to the advisors to deregulate. Number one is we have to deregulate state aid. Oh, come on. I mean, deregulating state aid, and this will bring productivity up. Sometimes maybe, but I have some doubts. Another one, I mean, I do subscribe to this, is capital markets. He brings Swedish example in most cases, but Greek example could be put in some cases as well. I think that's good. But no real deregulation. And when we look to European policies, Ursula von der Leyen kind of statement for the parliament at the beginning of her new term was very clear. She had like 5 elements in her speech, and number one was reducing regulation. Number one. She was speaking about over-regulating European Union and so on. That was promising, but when I looked at European Competitiveness Compass, which is like annual thing for European Union to produce at the beginning of each year, so last year, deregulation in Competitiveness Compass was number 3. Okay, it doesn't look very inspiring and no big steps in here, and actually, European Union is still with the same problems. Actually, it has the issue, a target of reducing administrative burden, which is not actually regulation. It's actually the time you spend filling up all these forms, which is very important, but still not a big thing. But how to deal with this regulation? I have this theory that in IAH, it's very difficult, unfortunately, very difficult to expect deregulation because IAH is producing regulation even more rapidly than before we were producing. But it has some promise as well, because we may change how regulation is actually implemented. And actually, this was the essence of my reform, changing the culture. Not so much of regulation itself, but more of culture. And in order to do this, of course, you have first to understand it in order to achieve it. To understand that, it's not these piles of documents which actually hampers business. It's actually actions of people who do hamper. And documents do influence action, but not only documents, culture, first of all. And you have to address the culture. And I will talk about this at the end of my presentation. Of course, you have to have passion in order to achieve this deregulation. And you have to have persistence. And you have to align with your clients and citizens. And I think this is very important. I did some research, some additional research also yesterday. Always you have to ask your drivers about the economy and the politics. And I asked my driver from the airport, and he mentioned the story about the recent, I'm not here also to teach you how to deal things, but this kind of recent last week activity of Greek government to close some post offices and so on. And he says, it was so disaster because nobody expected that. It was immediate quarrel inside the coalition, and it was like an immediate reaction afterwards. And I think it happens so often. I was doing this so many times as well. When you're afraid that you will be stopped, you would try to do it as quick as possible, as fast as possible. And then, of course, nobody even knows, why are you doing this? And when they do not know, of course, immediately you create an opposition. And when you create an opposition, even if you are successful, next year, after next election, it will be, it will be drawback. And I think it's very important to align with your clients and to talk to society about this, because this antagonistic approach never works. When speaking about technicalities a little bit, if you want to actually reduce like regulation, like burden of regulation, and that's actually right now my work is I'm advising on this so much, and actually it's a strange thing, but one of my main affiliations is actually Athens, because I work for Institute for Regulatory Innovation, Delivery and Effectiveness, which is a subsidiary of EPLO, European Public Law Organization, which is based in Athens. So in order to reduce the burden, first you have to measure it. And no one measures it in OECD. We in Lithuania invented it, we do a little bit of it. We have tragical system. We have very bad system of regulation implementation. It's just a little bit better than others. But we measure what we measure. We ask business people in annual survey, representative survey, so did anybody come to check you? How did they behave? Did they announce in advance? What fines did they issue? How did they do this and that? All these technical things. I mean, when I looked at the OECD report about my own reform in this area, they were analyzing this like for 5 pages, something is going better, something going worse afterwards, and so on, because it was done like 15 years ago. And then this small remark, it's very difficult to compare this data to other countries because no one else is committing these kind of reports. So basically no one even measures how tax inspection, labor inspection, food safety inspection, fire inspection, whatever name inspection, like you have at least 20 or 50 of them, actually they're behaving on business and are they very harmful or not. So measure it. Then, of course, you have to use a risk-based approach, which means that, for example, if you go to a restaurant, all the restaurants in European Union, they have regulations that all the surfaces have to be clean in the kitchen. If I would come and say, just please reduce this regulation, let's abolish this regulation. I mean, this would sound a little bit like nonsense, because if I was a restaurant owner, of course I would require my staff to keep the surfaces clean as well. I mean, it's not a big deal. But if you start fining restaurants for having a napkin on the floor, or like a small piece of sheet on a kitchen board or whatever, this would be nonsense. And actually, when focusing on actual risk, because most people get poisoned in restaurants because the same knife and cutting board is used for raw meat and then for fresh vegetables, 90%. So if you just focus on this, you may achieve huge results. In Lithuania, in 2 years, we had 30% less checks for restaurants, 30% less fines, and just a third of poisoning cases we had before. They just dropped like 4 times. So, I mean, this is a kind of magic of acknowledging the basic concept of economics, that you can have this amount of problems and this amount of resources for those. Just focus. You have to focus systematically. Then, of course, you have to be integral. Speaking about consultations, I mentioned. You have to avoid confrontation, I mentioned, in order to not to have drawbacks. And then there's a chance that you will achieve magical results. If you need some more details about what I was telling or advice whatsoever, I'm here open until this afternoon. So thank you for listening, and have all the best conference. Thank you.